Your jaw tightens when silence follows your words. You read faces, measure reactions, adjust yourself in real time. This discomfort is not a flaw. It is a signal that your center has been placed outside your own body. When approval becomes oxygen, every room owns you. There is a moment when the chase stops. What replaces it changes how you speak, how you decide, how you endure being misunderstood. Lesson 1. The hidden cost of living by other people's reactions reveals itself the moment you stop chasing approval. Until that moment, your life is shaped by glances, tone shifts, delayed replies, polite smiles that vanish too quickly. You call it awareness. You call it empathy. But beneath it, there is a quieter truth. Your decisions are negotiated with an invisible jury that never rests. You speak in meetings and watch the room more than your own words. You send a message and feel the seconds stretch while waiting for the response. You tell a story and adjust the ending based on the listener's expression. None of this looks like weakness on the surface. It looks like social skill. Yet, slowly, your inner voice lowers its volume. Eventually, you no longer know if a choice came from conviction or from fear of disapproval. Approval is a leash you hold against your own neck. Consider a simple moment. You buy clothes not because they serve you, but because they signal something to strangers. You hold back an opinion because it might create friction. You agree to plans that drain you because refusal might disappoint. Each decision seems small, harmless, practical, but repeated daily, they shape a man who is never fully present. He is always adjusting, recalibrating, negotiating his right to exist in the room. History has already tested this pattern. A man who lives by reaction becomes reactive. He no longer leads his own tempo. He moves at the pace of others' expectations. He laughs when he does not find it funny. He apologizes when he has done nothing wrong. He explains himself before anyone asks. This is not politeness. It is dependency wearing a civilized mask. What is the cost? Energy, clarity, dignity. You spend mental currency reading signals that were never meant to guide your life. You grow tired without knowing why. You feel restless in quiet rooms. You feel invisible even when surrounded because you outsourced your center. You placed your gravity in the hands of people who are also busy chasing theirs. Some call this being likable, but likability purchased through self-erasure is a fragile currency. One disagreement, one refusal, one boundary, and the applause thins. Then you panic. Then you soften your edges again. The cycle continues. There is a reason discomfort appears when you imagine not caring, a reason your chest tightens at the thought of being misunderstood. You were trained to believe acceptance equals safety. That belief kept you cooperative. It also kept you small. Picture a man walking into a room without scanning it for permission. He speaks slower. He chooses words because they are true, not because they will land softly. He does not chase nods. He does not rush to fill silence. At first, people shift uneasily. They are used to performers, not anchors. Yet something stabilizes in the air when someone is no longer bargaining for approval. The moment you stop chasing validation, everything changes, not around you, but inside you. A quiet pressure releases. A different posture settles. Not louder, not aggressive, simply unmoved by the weather of other people's reactions. And once you sense that shift, it becomes difficult to return to the old negotiations, even as the habit still whispers in the background, waiting to see if you will reach for the leash again. Lesson 2. Why the need for validation quietly erodes self-command becomes obvious once you glimpse the moment you stop chasing approval. Before that moment, you believe you are choosing your life. In reality, you are requesting permission for it. Every preference becomes a proposal. Every decision is softened before it is spoken. You ask the world, silently, if you are allowed to be who you already are. Self-command is not loud. It is not force. It is the ability to act without internal negotiation. But the habit of seeking validation installs a second voice in your mind. One voice states what you want. The other immediately asks how it will be received. Over time, the second voice gains seniority. It interrupts faster. It speaks with urgency. It wraps itself in logic. Soon, you do not realize that you have split yourself into actor and audience. A man without self-command is always mid-conversation with invisible others. You feel this when you hesitate before sending a message, when you rewrite the same sentence 3 times, when you picture a reaction before making a choice. The external world is no longer outside you. It lives in your head, voting on every move. You call this consideration, but consideration without a sovereign center becomes obedience. Look at ordinary situations. You know what you think about an issue, yet you phrase it as a question to avoid tension. You know you need rest, yet you agree to another commitment because saying no feels like rejection. You know a relationship is draining, yet you stay because leaving might make you appear cold. None of these decisions feel dramatic, but together they form a life lived with a lowered spine. Time has proven this pattern. Those who depend on validation become predictable. Predictability makes them safe to manipulate. A raised eyebrow can steer them. A delayed reply can unsettle them. A compliment can buy their compliance. This is not because they are weak. It is because they have trained themselves to respond rather than to decide. The cost appears later. You wake up one day and feel detached from your own biography. You recognize your roles, your obligations, your reputation. Yet, something essential feels unconsulted. The part of you that once knew its own direction has grown quiet from lack of use. You have mastered reading rooms, but forgotten reading yourself. Stopping the chase changes this. At first, it feels like standing without railings. You say something without cushioning it. You make a choice without rehearsing reactions. The body responds with tension. The old habit protests. It predicts danger. It warns of rejection. But you remain still. You watch the discomfort pass without correcting yourself. Gradually, a different order establishes itself. Your voice emerges before the imagined audience. Your decisions land without apology. You notice that the world does not collapse when you disappoint someone. You see that misunderstanding is survivable. You discover that silence after your words is not a verdict. It is simply space. Self-command returns not as a performance, but as gravity. Others feel it without explanation. You feel it most in private, when no one is watching and your mind no longer asks for approval before breathing. The habit of validation does not vanish instantly. It lingers like a former ruler asking to be consulted. Some days you will feel the reflex to check faces, to soften edges, to seek reassurance. And in that moment, you will know the difference between acting from your center and negotiating your existence again. Lesson 3. The difference between being seen and being directed emerges the moment you stop chasing approval. Before that moment, you believe visibility is power. You believe that if others recognize you, acknowledge you, validate you, then you hold position. But being seen is not the same as being sovereign. A man can be fully visible and still be led by invisible strings. When you live for validation, every interaction becomes a mirror. You speak and immediately search the reflection. Did they understand? Did they agree? Did they admire? Did they accept? The gaze of others becomes the compass. You feel oriented only when you are observed. This creates a subtle dependence. Without eyes on you, you feel undefined. Without feedback, you feel uncertain. Without recognition, you feel diminished. This is how being seen quietly turns into being directed. Consider the way you adjust yourself when someone important enters the room. Your tone shifts, your posture changes, your humor calibrates, your opinions soften or sharpen depending on the audience. You believe you are choosing how to present yourself. Yet beneath this is a deeper truth. You are being shaped in real time by the anticipation of reaction. You are not expressing, you are adapting. A man who needs to be seen becomes easy to steer. This plays out in careers. You take projects not because they matter, but because they will be noticed. You overextend to appear reliable. You sacrifice rest to signal commitment. You pursue titles that sound impressive, but leave you hollow. Each step feels like progress, yet each step is guided by external eyes. You rise, but not in a direction you selected. You climb, but on a ladder placed by others. It plays out in relationships. You mold yourself into what is appreciated. You mute what is inconvenient. You perform consistency rather than live it. You fear losing visibility more than losing authenticity. Over time, the person others see becomes a stranger to the person inside. And still, you maintain the performance because being unseen feels like erasure. History has already tested this pattern. Those who rely on recognition can be redirected by withholding it. A lack of praise unsettles them. A cold response disorients them. A shift in group opinion reroutes their stance. Their identity remains negotiable, traded for acceptance again and again. Stopping the chase reveals a stark difference. When you no longer seek approval, you no longer require constant reflection. You do not need to be seen to feel real. You do not need to be acknowledged to feel present. You speak because there is something to say, not because you need to be witnessed saying it. At first, this feels like standing in a dim room after years under bright lights. There is less stimulation, fewer signals, fewer cues. The mind protests. It asks if you are disappearing. But gradually, another sensation replaces the anxiety. You feel solid without observation. You feel defined without commentary. You feel whole without applause. Others notice the shift. You are harder to influence. Praise does not inflate you. Criticism does not collapse you. Silence does not provoke you. You remain not rigid, not defensive, simply self-contained. And in that state, when someone finally does see you, it is no longer direction. It is recognition of something that was already there, standing without needing to be confirmed. Lesson 4. How approval addiction trains you to betray your own judgment becomes clear only after you stop chasing validation. Before that, you trust your instincts less than the room. You feel a direction internally, then immediately hold it up to public inspection. If you sense resistance, you retreat. If you sense praise, you advance. Over time, your internal compass is no longer calibrated by truth, but by response. This is how a man becomes divided against himself without noticing. Your judgment begins as a quiet signal, a subtle sense that something is right or wrong for you. It does not shout. It does not justify itself. But the moment you have trained yourself to seek approval, that signal must pass through a filter. How will this look? How will it be received? Who might disagree? Who might withdraw warmth? The judgment is postponed, softened, negotiated. Eventually, it is replaced. You see this in simple choices. You know a certain path will cost you comfort, but serve your integrity. You hesitate. You imagine explaining it. You imagine confusion in someone's eyes. You imagine criticism. You choose the easier path instead. Not because it is right, because it is approved. You see it in convictions. You sense an opinion forming. Before you speak, you test it against the perceived consensus. If it does not match, you dilute it. You present half a thought. You laugh to signal uncertainty. You make sure escape routes remain open. Soon, you cannot tell whether you believe what you say or merely say what can survive. A man who doubts his own judgment will rent certainty from others. This addiction is subtle because it feels like social intelligence. You call it being reasonable, open-minded, easy to work with, but the cost is internal authority. When a crisis arrives, you look outward for answers. When a challenge appears, you wait for guidance. When conflict emerges, you abandon your stance early. You are trained to yield before pressure, long before force is applied. Time has proven this pattern. Those who betray their judgment to preserve approval lose both. They gain neither respect nor self-trust. People sense the instability. They sense the malleability. They offer less trust, not more. And internally, the man becomes cautious with himself. He no longer believes his first impulse. He delays, doubts, second guesses. His own mind becomes foreign territory. The moment you stop chasing approval, this training is exposed. You feel the reflex rise. You sense an internal position forming. You feel the urge to check it against reactions. And for the first time, you do not. You let the judgment stand in silence. No announcement, no defense, no request for agreement. It feels dangerous at first, like stepping onto thin ice. You expect punishment, you expect exclusion, you expect loss. But what actually happens is quieter. Some people disagree, some withdraw, some test you, and you remain, not hardened, not hostile, simply intact. This is where self-trust is rebuilt, not by affirmations, not by confidence displays, but by surviving the discomfort of standing by your own judgment without negotiation. Each time you do this, the inner voice grows firmer. It speaks sooner. It requires less confirmation. It becomes familiar again. Eventually, a shift occurs. You no longer ask if your judgment is allowed. You ask only if it is true. And when it is, you act. Without performance, without explanation, without the need to be carried by consensus. The world around you adjusts slowly, almost reluctantly, to a man who no longer trades his inner authority for external permission. Lesson 5. The silent power that appears when you stop explaining yourself is born from the moment you stop chasing approval. Before that shift, every action is followed by a justification. Every boundary is wrapped in reasons. Every decision is softened with context. You believe this is courtesy. In reality, it is a habit built from fear of being misjudged. A man who needs approval feels compelled to translate himself. You say no, then immediately give an explanation so the refusal will be accepted. You change direction, then offer a story so the shift will be understood. You hold a boundary, then justify it so it will not be taken personally. This constant explaining is not communication. It is negotiation, and negotiation reveals uncertainty in your own stance. The world learns quickly. If you explain, you can be debated. If you justify, you can be persuaded. If you defend, you can be worn down. Each explanation opens a door through which others can enter your decisions. Soon, you are not living by your word, but by your ability to convince. Silence is not absence, it is selection. When you stop chasing validation, the impulse to explain begins to weaken. At first, it feels rude, dangerous, incomplete. You state a decision and leave it standing. You watch the other person wait for reasons. Their discomfort rises. Your own reflex to fill the space activates. But you do not move. You let the silence hold. This changes the structure of interaction. You are no longer seeking agreement. You are declaring position, not aggressively, not theatrically, simply without open negotiation. The absence of explanation communicates something deeper than words. It signals that your decision is not tentative. It is not a request. It is the result. Real-life situations expose the contrast. A manager who explains every instruction invites endless discussion. A father who justifies every rule raises children who test every limit. A partner who defends every boundary teaches the other where to press. Explanation trains others to probe. Silence trains others to listen. History has already tested this pattern. Those who hold power speak less, not more. They choose words carefully and allow space to remain. They do not scramble to be understood. They allow misunderstanding to exist without panic. Over time, their presence carries weight, not because they demand it, because they do not chase it. Stopping explanation does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming precise. You speak when words serve the moment. You refrain when words would dilute the stance. You answer questions directly. You do not preemptively defend. You allow others to feel their own reactions without managing them. This produces an internal shift. You no longer feel responsible for how your decisions land in every mind. You recognize that discomfort in others is not a crisis to solve. You stop performing emotional labor for imagined judgments. You become less reactive, less hurried, less porous. At first, people may test you. They may push for reasons. They may interpret silence as arrogance. Let them. Their interpretation is their domain. Your role is not to correct every misunderstanding. Your role is to remain aligned with your chosen position. Over time, something quiet forms around you. Conversations slow when you speak. Arguments lose fuel when you do not explain. Provocations fall flat when you do not justify. You become difficult to manipulate, not because you resist, but because there is less to grab onto. And in that space, you discover a different kind of authority. Not the loud authority of dominance, but the still authority of a man who no longer bargains for his right to stand where he stands. Lesson 6. Why most men never survive the withdrawal from validation becomes evident when you reach the moment you stop chasing approval. The chase does not end politely. It ends like a hunger that suddenly finds no food. The mind, long trained to feed on nods, praise, reassurance, and agreement, begins to search the environment for signals. When none are provided, it produces discomfort. When discomfort is not relieved, it produces doubt. When doubt is not answered, it produces panic. This is where most return to the old pattern. Validation is not just a habit, it is a dependency. It regulates mood, it stabilizes identity, it provides a sense of safety. Remove it, and the system shakes. A man who has lived by external affirmation will feel a strange hollowness when he no longer pursues it. He may interpret this as loneliness, or as meaninglessness, or as failure. In truth, it is withdrawal. You feel it in quiet moments. No messages arrive. No praise is offered. No reactions confirm your presence. The mind begins to ask if you matter. It suggests sending something just to provoke a response. It suggests performing again. It suggests returning to the familiar exchange of stimulus and reassurance. The temptation is strong because the discomfort feels unnatural. Yet the discomfort is simply the nervous system adjusting to sovereignty. Most men do not endure this phase. They misinterpret the symptoms. They believe they have become detached, cold, or irrelevant. They fear losing connection. They fear being forgotten. So they re-enter the marketplace of approval. They resume explaining, adjusting, performing, pleasing. The withdrawal ends. The dependency remains. A man who cannot tolerate being unvalidated cannot be free. You see this in social environments. A man who always speaks quickly after others talk to show engagement. A man who laughs a little too soon. A man who offers agreement before conviction. These are not expressions of personality. They are attempts to avoid the feeling of being unanchored. Silence feels like danger to him. Disagreement feels like expulsion. Indifference feels like death. Time has proven this pattern. The majority prefer the familiar discomfort of dependence to the unfamiliar discipline of autonomy. They choose the small relief of applause over the long silence of self-possession. Not because they are incapable, but because the early stages feel like loss. To stop chasing approval is to walk through a corridor with no mirrors. At first, you feel unseen, undefined, unmeasured. You wonder if you still exist in the same way. You are tempted to speak just to hear an echo. You are tempted to post, to perform, to provoke reaction. This is the mind searching for its old anchors. If you remain still, something shifts. You begin to feel your own presence without reflection. You sense your body more clearly, your breath, your posture, your internal rhythm. You notice that existence does not require witness, that identity does not require announcement, that worth does not require verification. This stage is quiet. No triumph, no declaration, no reward, just a subtle stabilizing. A man who survives this withdrawal does not become superior. He becomes self-contained. He is no longer hungry for reactions. He is no longer starved by their absence. Few reach this point. Fewer remain here consistently. Most visit briefly, then return to the noise. But those who stay develop a different relationship with the world. They can enter rooms without needing to take them over. They can leave conversations without needing to be remembered. They can live portions of their life unwitnessed. And once you have tasted this state, the old chase begins to feel exhausting. The old bargaining begins to feel undignified. The old performance begins to feel like noise. Yet the habit remains nearby, waiting for a moment of fatigue, a moment of insecurity, a moment of loneliness. This is why most never survive the withdrawal. They mistake the silence of independence for the emptiness of failure, and in doing so, they turn back before discovering what quietly forms on the other side of the chase. Lesson 7. What remains when applause no longer determines your worth is revealed only after the moment you stop chasing approval. Before this shift, worth feels elastic. It expands when praised. It contracts when ignored. It rises with recognition. It sinks with criticism. You become accustomed to this fluctuation. You call it normal. You call it human. Yet it keeps you externally tethered, always awaiting the next signal that tells you who you are allowed to be. When applause disappears, the first thing you notice is the silence it leaves behind. No external measure, no immediate feedback, no emotional scoreboard. The instinct is to replace it, to find a new audience, a new metric, a new arena. Many men do exactly this. They quit one source of validation only to install another. They leave a crowd and seek a different one. They abandon one performance and begin rehearsing a new role. The chase changes costume, not structure. But if you remain still long enough, you encounter something unfamiliar, a version of yourself that is not inflated by praise or reduced by disapproval. At first, it feels smaller, quieter, less dramatic, yet it is also more stable. You begin to sense your worth, not as a feeling, but as a fact, not something granted, something assumed. A man who no longer needs applause stands differently in the world. You notice it in simple acts. You finish a task and feel no urge to announce it. You make progress and do not need to display it. You endure something difficult and keep it private. The absence of recognition no longer cancels the achievement. It simply leaves it intact. You experience effort without exhibition, growth without performance, discipline without an audience. This is where most men feel uncertain. If no one claps, did it matter? If no one sees, did it happen? If no one approves, was it right? These questions arise from a life lived as a public event. But when you stop feeding them, a different question takes their place. Did it align with what I chose to stand for? The shift is subtle but decisive. The reference point moves inward. History has already tested this pattern. The men who shaped eras were not sustained by applause. Applause followed them, or did not. Their actions did not depend on it. They worked in silence. They endured misunderstanding. They carried principles that were not popular. They accepted being unseen. Their worth did not rise and fall with the mood of the crowd. When you step into this posture, relationships change. You no longer demand reassurance. You no longer fish for praise. You no longer collapse under critique. Others feel less pressure around you. Interactions become simpler. Words carry more weight. Compliments are received without hunger. Disapproval is received without collapse. You also begin to recognize how much energy was spent on maintaining worth through reaction, the constant checking, the subtle performances, the emotional adjustments. When that energy is released, it does not explode outward. It settles. You feel less urgency, less need to prove, less compulsion to be remembered. This does not make you indifferent. It makes you precise. You choose when to engage. You choose when to speak. You choose when to reveal. The rest remains yours, unexposed, untraded. Over time, you realize something quiet. Worth that depends on applause is fragile because applause is inconsistent. Worth that stands without applause is durable because it does not require conditions. This is not pride. It is not self-celebration. It is simply the absence of negotiation. The world may still offer praise, it may still offer criticism. Both arrive, both pass. And underneath them, something remains untouched, steady, and unconcerned with proving that it deserves to exist. Lesson 8. How detachment from opinion sharpens every decision you make becomes clear after the moment you stop chasing approval. Before that shift, opinions feel like weather systems. They move around you, influencing your direction, your pace, your tone. You check them instinctively. You anticipate them. You brace for them. Over time, you mistake awareness of opinion for wisdom. But opinion is noise until proven otherwise. A man attached to opinion does not decide. He negotiates. He weighs potential reactions more than actual outcomes. He imagines how a choice will be judged before he imagines whether it is correct. This turns decision-making into performance. You are no longer asking what is necessary. You are asking what will be accepted. Detachment does not mean ignoring reality. It means removing emotional dependency from reaction. You still listen. You still observe. You still gather information. But you no longer treat opinion as command. You treat it as data. Nothing more, nothing less. Consider a professional setting. A proposal is presented. A man seeking validation reads the room before he reads the proposal. If approval is likely, he leans in. If resistance is sensed, he withdraws. His decision is shaped before the facts are processed. Another man listens fully. He weighs implications. He chooses. Only after does he consider how it may land. One is reacting to opinion. The other is using it as secondary input. Detachment sharpens decisions because it removes distortion. When you no longer need agreement, you can think clearly in disagreement. When you no longer fear criticism, you can inspect your own flaws honestly. When you no longer chase praise, you can recognize when you are wrong without humiliation. This clarity is rare because it requires a man to stand without external cushions. A man governed by opinion is predictable. He moves with the majority. He avoids friction. He adopts fashionable positions. He changes views when the room changes tone. He calls this being informed. But beneath it, there is no anchor, only adjustment. History has already tested this pattern. Progress was never made by men who required approval first. They acted. They endured backlash. They stayed. Time sorted truth from noise. Opinion is immediate. Consequence is delayed. The detached man serves consequence, not opinion. In daily life, this appears in small ways. You choose a path that is less impressive but more sustainable. You buy what you need, not what signals status. You rest when necessary, not when permitted. You speak plainly even when sophistication is expected. You walk away from environments that drain you even when they offer recognition. Each decision becomes simpler because the audience has been dismissed. This simplicity feels stark at first. Without opinion as reference, you must confront reality directly. No applause to inflate, no criticism to excuse, just cause and effect, choice and outcome, responsibility without spectators. Over time, you begin to sense the sharpening. Your decisions take less time. Your explanations grow shorter. Your regret decreases. Not because every choice is perfect, but because each one is yours. Fully owned, fully inhabited. No hidden bargains. Others may not understand. They may call you indifferent. They may call you stubborn. They may call you difficult. Let them. Their labels are attempts to reinsert you into the old system, to make you responsive again, to return you to negotiation. But you have already seen the difference. A life directed by opinion is a life spent scanning. A life detached from opinion is a life spent seeing. And once your eyes adjust to that clarity, it becomes hard to return to the dim, shifting light of the crowd's approval. Lesson 9. The social consequences of no longer chasing acceptance appear after the moment you stop seeking validation. Until then, your social life is built on subtle agreements. You will adjust, soften, agree, laugh, explain, accommodate. In return, you receive inclusion, warmth, familiarity, a place at the table. The exchange is quiet but constant. You trade pieces of yourself for smoothness. When you stop, the contracts dissolve. Acceptance is a contract. Independence voids it. At first, nothing dramatic happens. You simply respond more slowly. You speak with fewer cushions. You stop volunteering explanations. You decline invitations without elaborate excuses. You disagree without soft laughter. You hold eye contact a second longer. Small changes. Yet social systems are sensitive. They detect deviation. They respond. Some people become confused. They ask if something is wrong. They search for the old cues. They probe for reassurance. When none arrives, they feel unsettled, not because you harmed them, but because the previous balance has shifted. You are no longer predictable, no longer easily guided by the promise of acceptance. Others take offense. They interpret your steadiness as coldness, your brevity as arrogance, your refusal to perform as disrespect. They may withdraw warmth. They may test you with sarcasm. They may provoke. They are attempting to pull you back into the familiar dance, where reaction is currency. A man who no longer seeks acceptance must withstand being misread. You will notice invitations change, some decrease, some disappear. Social circles that relied on your compliance feel less comfortable. Conversations that thrived on mutual performance feel thinner. Jokes that required your laughter hang in the air longer. Group decisions that assumed your agreement now pause when you do not immediately nod. This is not loss, it is sorting. There are also unexpected arrivals. Some people speak more honestly around you. They sense you are not negotiating your presence. They relax. They drop their own performances. Conversations become slower, less decorated, more precise. These interactions are fewer but denser, less frequent but more real. In professional spaces, consequences sharpen. Superiors who relied on your eagerness may feel resistance. Colleagues who counted on your flexibility may see you as difficult. Yet those who value clarity begin to trust you more. They know your yes is real, your no is final. Your position does not shift with mood. Romantic dynamics change as well. A partner accustomed to your constant reassurance may feel unmoored. They may ask for proof of care. They may interpret your steadiness as distance. This becomes a mirror. Either the relationship deepens into mutual solidity, or it collapses under the weight of its own dependency. Both outcomes are honest. Friendships reveal their foundation. Some were built on shared approval-seeking, shared complaints, shared performance. When one stops, the rhythm breaks. Silence appears. Without the old dance, there is little to hold. These friendships fade without conflict, simply from lack of structure. This phase tests endurance, not physical, social, the discomfort of fewer invitations, the discomfort of being discussed, the discomfort of being the one who changed. The old reflex whispers, apologize, explain, reassure, return to the role, smooth everything again. It would be easy, familiar, warm, but you remain. Not loud, not defensive, not superior, just still, present, unnegotiated. Eventually, a new social landscape forms, smaller, clearer, less noisy. You are not at every table. You are not in every conversation. You are not universally liked. But where you stand whole. Where you speak from yourself. Where you are absent, nothing of you is owed. The world continues to move. Opinions circulate. Invitations come and go. Glances rise and fall. And inside, a quiet awareness remains, observing which relationships required your self-erasure and which ones survive your presence without compromise. Lesson 10. The internal shift that turns solitude into authority completes the moment you stop chasing approval. Before this change, solitude feels like lack, a gap, a room without witnesses. You fill it with noise, messages, background sound, constant contact. Not because you need people, but because you need reflection. Without another mind responding, your own presence feels unfinished. That is the final dependency. When you stop seeking validation, you eventually encounter solitude without panic. Not immediately. At first, the absence of reaction feels sharp. You reach for your phone. You think of something to share. You imagine how it would be received. The old hunger searches for its meal. But slowly the hunger weakens, and in the space it leaves, something unfamiliar appears. You begin to experience yourself without audience. Not the self you present, not the self you explain, not the self you soften for acceptance. The unedited self. The one that thinks without announcing, observes without reacting, decides without consulting. This is where authority is born. Not the authority of dominance over others, but the authority of possession over your own mind. A man who cannot be alone without performance cannot lead himself. In solitude, your choices become clear. There is no one to impress, no one to reassure, no one to blame. If you act, it is because you chose. If you delay, it is because you decided. If you fail, it is yours. If you succeed, it is yours. Responsibility is no longer shared with the crowd. This is heavy at first, then it becomes grounding. You notice how your posture changes when no one is watching. Your face relaxes, your breath deepens, your movements slow. You are no longer signaling. You are simply existing. In this state, thought becomes sharper. You see what matters because there is no external noise pretending to matter more. History has already tested this pattern. Those who shaped the world spent long stretches unseen. Their solitude was not escape, it was formation. They learned to hold their own gaze before facing the gaze of others. They answered to conscience before answering to crowd. They cultivated an inner room so solid that no external storm could displace it. As solitude becomes familiar, authority emerges quietly. You walk differently, speak differently, choose differently, not to project strength, not to assert presence, but because you are no longer fragmented across other people's expectations. Your energy is gathered, centered, whole. Others feel this without explanation. They sense you do not need them to be a certain way for you to remain steady. This is rare. Most men lean on others for emotional balance. When one does not, he becomes a fixed point, not controlling, not demanding, simply reliable in his stance. You also discover that solitude is not isolation. You can engage deeply when you choose. You can listen without needing to perform agreement. You can love without needing reassurance. You can disagree without fearing disconnection, because your center does not live in the interaction. It lives within you. The world still moves around you. People praise, people criticize, people come and go. But the internal room remains furnished, quiet, ordered, yours. No applause echoes there. No opinion dictates there. No external permission is required to stand. The moment you stopped chasing approval began as discomfort. It led through silence, through withdrawal, through loss of old patterns, and here it reveals its final shape. A man alone with himself, not lonely. A man unseen, yet fully present. A man whose authority is not granted, but assumed.